With regard to its age, the vampire of superstition will not have been long dead, yet will be zombie-like, thick-headed and stupid, the opposite of his fictional counterpart, who, though he may have been dead for centuries, will have used his time profitably to become learned, intelligent and adroit. The sexual element is latent in folklore, exaggerated in fiction and embellished by perversions and the corruption of innocence. The religious ingredient is usually indispensable in literature. The arrival of the priest, hero being integral to the plot. In addition, there may be a sense of pity for the vampire, not encountered in folklore, a feeling that he is as much a victim as victimizer, in keeping with the tradition of False and the Wandering Jew. The vampire of fiction, as earlier outlined, may have acquired its condition for any one of countless reasons. The origins of its literary cousins will either be left undisclosed or else result from some form of pact with the devil. Finally, the vampire of literature possesses remarkable staying powers and regenerative abilities like the villain in modern crime thrillers. The vampire must not be caught and destroyed too easily, and the means for his or her destruction will normally comply with the more sensational methods prescribed by folklore. The gorier the better from the reader's point of view. The wealth of folklore and literary antecedents was thoroughly assimilated by Bram Stoker. Dracula fuses the tradition of the Byronic hero, Gothic villain, with that of the femme fatale, and overlays the whole with a rich veneer of folklore. Stoker ignores the popular device of citing his tale in a remote land in a bygone age, and brings all his powerful cant to contemporary England, to the crowded streets of London in the 1890s. The late Victorian upsurge in tales of the supernatural assisted him to construct a character far more evil than Carmilla, and far more substantial than Varney, for as Woolf has said, there is nothing in Varney, nothing at all, that is capable of sounding anything like the chords of dark understanding that reverberate in page after page of Stoker's Dracula. With that reminder, it is time to take a closer look at Bram Stoker, the man who wrote Dracula. Sweet, sweet, good, good women. There is no head above the head of a serpent, and there is no wrath above the wrath of a woman. I had rather dwell with a lion and a dragon than to keep house with a wicked woman. All wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman. What else is a woman but a foe to friendship, an unescapable punishment, a necessary evil, a natural temptation, a desirable calamity, a domestic danger, a delectable detriment, an evil of nature painted with fair colours. Women are naturally more impressionable and more ready to receive the influence of the disembodied spirit. They have slippery tongues. Since they are feebler both in mind and body, it is not surprising that they should come more and more under the spell of witchcraft. Women are intellectually like children. She is more carnal than a man, as is clear from her many carnal abominations. For the sake of fulfilling their lust, they consort even with the devils. She is a liar by nature. Malleus Maleficarum. Male hostility towards and fear and suspicion of women is as old as time. Was it not the act of childbirth, the greatest and most inexplicable act of magic of all? And why had women always lived longer than men, providing they survived childbirth, and been more immune, historically, to plagues and pestilence? What other unknown powers of sorcery did they possess? While their menfolk fought and died in countless battles, women stayed at home to pass on their mistress to their daughters. Classical Europe was not above contempt for women. Seneca, tragedies, wrote of their lust, hatred, pride, and evil. Cicero, the rhetorics, complained of their avarice, and even Socrates referred to them as a confounded nuisance, necessary only for producing heirs. The Christian religion then lent a new dimension to misogynous persecution. From St. Paul onwards, women were accused as the temptress of men. Women, after all, was not created in God's image, but was a mere bent rib from Adam's breast. Eve was shown to be fickle and weak-minded, and these qualities were assumed to have been handed down to women in general. The Bible tends to discriminate against the weaker sex, and the extraordinary language of Malleus Maleficarum testifies to the official church view of womankind in 15th and 16th century Europe. Women not only attracted the devil, they also had his mark on their anatomy. Just as the ancients could imagine the shapes of the constellations when gazing up at the heavens, so the dissected woman's belly revealed two sweeping fallopian tubes, surely the horns of the devil. Woman, in short, was the source of all man's evil, soiling his reason with her desire. The great problem for the Church was how to reconcile the perceived abomination of most women with the divine perfection of the Virgin Mary. It was solved by cutting out the middle ground. Women were either fallen creatures with treacherous minds and lecherous bodies, a recruiting ground for the devil, or they were saint-like, obedient to the commands of men, and exalted for their spiritual and bodily purity. Women, in other words, knew no moderation. They were either sacred beyond belief or forced from the pits of hell. English literature has always reflected this dichotomy. Chaucer's Cresseide is fickle. Shakespeare's Hamlet sees Gertrude as weak and disgusting. Milton's temptresses are shown as iniquitous, and Restoration comedies depict flirtatious behavior by older women with contempt. By the 18th century, novelists such as Richardson and Fielding became custodians of public morality. Female innocence and purity were celebrated through their heroines, stoically resisting seduction. In Fielding's Tom Jones, for example, the hero has his fling with loose women, but finally marries a pure one. Pope and Swift look upon female sexuality almost with disdain, and Richardson conveys near paranoia at its very existence. His Clarissa, bereft of her virginity through rape and as yet unmarried, has no recourse but to take her own life. With the coming of the 19th century, sexual liaisons produce such embarrassment that it becomes almost impossible to express them openly in fiction. The division between the idealized angelic purity of good women and the defiled untouchables is never so marked. Throughout Victorian literature, flirtatious women rarely earn sympathy, and overt sexuality barely breaks the surface. One of the few Victorian novels to contain a rampantly sexual woman, and even here the suggestion is made obliquely, is Jane Eyre, in which Charlotte Bronte demonstrates utter loathing for the presupposed romps of Bertha Rochester, whose sexual appetite all but deprives her of her humanity. Naturally, Bertha's promiscuity can have just one explanation: she is deranged. Only the mad and the sick can behave as she does. Bronte's description of this lewd woman is revealing. I never saw a face like it. It was a discoloured face. It was a savage face. I wish I could forget the role of the red eyes and the fearful blackened inflation of the lineaments. The lips were swelled and dark, the brow furrowed, the black eyebrows widely raised over bloodshot eyes. Shall I tell you what she reminded me? Of that foul German spectre, the vampire. Bronte only mentions this vampire this once, but it is clear that she and her readers were familiar with the psychological association between female lasciviousness and demonic blood-sucking. The implication could hardly be more explicit. Sexually active women were associated in the Victorian mind with mental derangement and devilry. Typical Victorian heroines are the opposite of Bertha Rochester. They are pure souls existed only to be loved and rescued from malicious adversaries by good, brave men. This holds true for Dracula, although the novel on many occasions expresses a view of female inferiority. Seward, speaking of Van Helsing, says, "He laughed till he cried, and I had to draw down the blinds lest anyone should see us and misjudge. And then he cried till he laughed again, and laughed and cried together, just as a woman does. I tried to be stern with him, as one is to a woman under the circumstance. But it had no effect. Men and women are so different in manifestations of nervous strength or weakness." Van Helsing, upon first meeting Harker's wife, says, "Ah, then, you have a good memory for facts, for details. It is not always so with young ladies." He is obviously used to scatterbrained females, but he is relieved to find that there are good women still left to make life happy. One of the book's minor characters is given in the words, "You can't trust wolves no more than women." Dracula, in fact, turns out to be a fusion of contempt for women, adulation of them, and an overdose of female sexuality. In the novel we meet two young ladies, both targets of the Count, and both acting as windows on the tensions aroused by male-female relations in the 1890s.